So a lot of stuff in a short period of time. And I guess I'm really interested, because again, it was a little hard to read the crowd. What resonated with you? What kinds of things did the talk raise up for you? Anything? Sir.
Wait, if you're going to talk,
sorry.
wait 1 second till I get to the mic. We have people we are live streaming to, and we want everyone to hear your ideas.
Okay, when you talked about the Salt Eaters from Tony Cade Bombara, and you discussed what well is, can you give an example of what well is?
That's a great question. Someone who is we were talking about this last night in a small group of, I think it was doctoral students and other folks. But someone who is well is well in, that song is well in their soul. So they are free at a certain level. They are well in their spirit. They're not troubled. There's a certain kind of peace that they find. There's a joy that they find in the work that they're doing. There's a resonance between the purpose of their work and the actual work that they're doing. So someone who's well finds sort of resonance in the work that they're doing, right? It isn't just about their physical wellness, although that might be part of it, but it's about their spiritual wellness as well. Like, am I doing what I was sent here to do? Am I doing what I am supposed to be doing on purpose for a purpose? And many of us, in these busy lives and these crazy work that we do, we don't have time to sit and think about what it means to be well. But I listened last night as I think it was a special ed teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and they talked about how they work every day in these structures that clearly do not love them, but yet they love those children. And so how do you continue to be well in a system where the structure isn't just, it isn't fair? And part of that has to do with realizing that your purpose is larger than the school that you're working in. Your purpose is larger than being the role as a teacher. Your purpose is a larger purpose for being here. And it's wrapped up in all of the work that you do, not just the job that you have. There's a distinction between the job and the work. The work is the larger spiritual purpose that you're here to engage in. The job is the thing that sends you the paycheck every month. I love my job. Makes me happy, especially when the paycheck shows up. But my work is larger than my job. My work includes this kind of stuff. My work includes being on the continent. My work includes being a good daughter, a good mother, a good wife. But being well means that there is a resonance and a sort of understanding that I am here for a larger purpose than simply being a teacher. I'm here for a larger purpose. Does that help? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I really enjoyed when you were saying that remembering is being joyful in the world. Mm-hmm. And I also like that you used research, revision, representing, recognition in such a different way. And taking those words and taking the which means to do again.
Exactly.
Correct? To research. To change, to search, to investigate within, right? Instead of what we would normally consider research, to do research, to look at the world outside of us. So to search within ourselves. And you've done that with each of those words, that revision. It's more of an internalizing than an external type of exercise to do. And so that really helped me to refocus, and especially within this last week, because I told my AP, I said, you know what? This is not what I went into for teaching, and I'm rediscovering through my class that I'm taking, that I really want to do, is more the community work. And through my teaching that I'm presently doing, I'm moving away from that community work. And I don't want to do that. I want to fully engage in the community work, the family engagement, and not tie into that rat treadmill of just putting out the lesson plans, doing it, hurry up, finish, accomplish for the SBAC. No, I want to go back to the root of why I wanted to teach rather than what's being forced on me. So I thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I think that's where your joy is too. You can even, even just watching you talk about it, there was something about this idea of a community being fundamental to what you understand teaching and learning to be. Fundamental. But how sometimes it's really difficult to build those communities within the context of schooling. So yeah, I appreciate the comments. Glad it raised those things up. Other things that bubbled up.
Something you said that really resonated with me is when you said Black women offer you an invitation to remember. And that's something I felt is extremely important because you talked about wellness and wholeness, and you must be whole before you can be the teacher that Black children deserve and that all children need. And I think that is something very important for all of us to remember. And remembering who you are and how you can transform every student. So thank you.
You're
awesome.
welcome. Yeah, this idea that, this is not education that only, our education isn't just what Black women do. It's a charge to everybody in this room. If you were like me and you grew up in schools in this country, most of our history overall is anemic. But our history of Black people and other people of color, other communities, is even more anemic. And how do we then teach children who embody those histories, even without them knowing it, well, if we don't engage in a recovering of that history as well? So it's not that we're going to ever get to a place where we're finished. This is not going to be a project of finishing. We will always only have partial knowledge. But it does seem to me that we've got to be moving in that direction. What is it we know? And how do we teach then what we know? And how do the children teach us what they are? And where are the opportunities for children to do that in the context of your classes?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for first acknowledging our Creator. I appreciate that. I love looking back to look forward. And another word you said that really, a couple of times, that is one of my words that I focus on is intentionality. And teaching children, changing the minds is a shift of the heart, and that begins with me first. As a adoptive foster mom, not only becoming an educator, but having 2 children who are mixed and African American, this is important for me. Knowing who I am, who I belong to, which is the Creator. Everything can be transformed that I touch, from me to home, to the community, to education, to the children that I come in contact with, everyone for that matter. And I love when you said work with every breath to show up whole, right? It's always a work in progress.
Absolutely.
And final thing is it's all for the mind, the body, and the spirit to just, with self first, to be able to move forward with my kids. Again, my community and the kids that I'm gonna educate in the future. So thank you for all the reminders.
Thank you for hearing them.
Hi. So I took a big focus on, and I have been just from the things that I've been reading lately, just the way that enslaved people were stripped of their history, of their culture. So where can we start as a non-Black educator? Because I can, in a certain way, trace my lineage and my history back to, the roots in Mexico and things like that. So I know where I can start from myself and my culture. But when it comes to these students that may be descendants of enslaved people and might not be able to trace their roots, and I'm not saying pinpoint exactly, but even generalizing, where can we start? Because the African continent is so huge.
It is.
And diverse. So without, creating these stereotypes or just lumping them all together, because we don't want to do that. How can we respectfully, or where can we respectfully begin that process?
I so appreciate that question. I hope I'm still on. I don't know if I can't hear. I've got a cold. All these things are happening. But I appreciate your question for a couple of reasons. One, because I think it raises up something that's really important, which is to tell the truth to your students. Like, in our role as teachers, sometimes we think we should already know, and we don't. And so how do we take that journey with them to understand where that history began? It feels to me like that's the work. Like together we're going to learn about this history that we didn't know. But I guess I would say start here and trace your way back. There are sites, there are spaces, sacred spaces here in the United States that are important to study. There's an entire website at the Schomburg that is about the history of African people, that is a virtual sort of space of study that's possible. There are children's books, there are sites. What's here in Las Vegas? What is Black history here? What's the history of Black folks in Las Vegas? Who came? How did it intersect with other histories? How do we begin that as a study of our local community and work our way out? How did Black people get to Las Vegas? And why did they come? Who was with them? And who did they meet when they got here? That feels like the kind of study that could be one that's engaging with students about beginning to look at those roots. So to trace from the local out to the larger. I think it's important, especially if we're talking about the continent of Africa, that we think about it as a continent. Because then the claims that we can make are to the entire continent. It was divided by colonial powers, right? But it is diverse, very diverse, even by its nature. So beginning to study from here out, and then working with the entire continent instead of solely one place on the continent. I focus on Ghana in particular because of its resonances with the United States. If we look at sort of historically, somewhere between 60 to 75% of African American lineage can be traced to the western side of the continent. Now, is that Ghana, or is that Gambia, or is that Senegal? I don't know. But it wasn't Gambia, Ghana, and Senegal. It was Africa. And so I don't tend to get too hung up on the countries themselves, but more the people within those countries. The Akan, the Ga, the Fanti, the Ashanti. Those are the groups that I tend to try to work with to try to help students and myself understand what this place was before. I don't know if that begins to get to your question, but I don't think it's a study that you need to do alone. I think you and your students could do that study in a really powerful way together, but start here so that the study of there is linked intimately to here. And so it isn't the study of the exotic person over there, but it's the study of the way that we are connected to there. right? And I think that's the gift that history has, is that it helps us locate ourselves today. But it's relevant to kids and to me in its bridge, in its ability to be able to bridge my connection to that place versus simply to see it. Of course, if it were up to me, as Dr. Love says in the foreword of the book, my book, she says, everybody should have a trip and go there and be there. Your kids, your teachers, principals, all of us. But since that probably will not happen, working our way back by virtue of the sacred spaces and the resources we have here seems like the right thing to do. Now, we can talk about resources later if you want to, about particular resources that might be useful. What grade do you teach? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh, we could talk for days about kindergarten resources that link both of these, well, especially Ghana and the United States. But I do think there has to be this bridge built between the two so that it isn't them and us, but it's us as a globe, right? Does that help? Yeah, okay. And I've got a whole school of preschoolers if you want to be in contact with them. Yeah. They love writing letters.
So I try to be very intentional when I teach my students about culture or about social studies.
Sure.
And I'm in first grade.
Okay.
So I also think back to my own experience in the school district here, and all that I learned about Black history was slavery and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you bridge the gap of teaching the truth of what happened, but also because I try to emphasize on people that I didn't grow up with learning.
Mm-hmm.
So like the inventors or like the great Black people, not just on the traumatizing part of it.
Sure.
So how do you bridge that gap of being truthful, but then also not in that level of like first grade?
Sure. And I think it's both the inventors and the famous people, but it's also the people that live right in the community where kids are. Those are some of the best folks for understanding the stories, particularly the local stories, but understanding the stories of that child in particular, but also that community more broadly. So can your first graders, and I've watched this happen, it's incredible. First graders doing interviews with their aunties or their pastors or whatever it might be, whoever it might be in their communities. Them actually serving as the Oprah for it. Y'all, you would have had to seen it. It was something in Athens. They had to go and be Oprah, and they had to interview someone in their community that was at least 30 years older than they were. So it was math, right? They had to figure out how much 30 years past their age was, and then they could interview that person. So they created the questions, and then they went to interview that person about that history. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. So I'm saying, I guess, like I shared with the sister before, these are lessons that can be engaging for all of you, for you as a teacher and the students. But at first graders are incredibly capable people. They can ask incredible questions, some which you don't even want them to ask. And they ask the question that they want to know the answer to. And sometimes those questions are more profound, many times, than anything we could have come up with. So I guess I like the approach of starting with communities that you maybe didn't learn about. But I also like the approach of being able to sort of center that learning in the lives of the children in front of you. And again, if we are able to sort of help them make connections to this happening in this place, and how does the same thing happen in another place and in another place, they begin to have variations of a similar story of the thing. How do houses happen? How do schools happen? How do people do these things in that place? So that they can begin to understand that this is no better than another place. It's just a different way of doing it, maybe. But I would let those kids lead that thing. And I want to be a fly on the wall when they come back and have their moments. Yeah. I hope that helped answer your question. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. First of all, Dr. Dillard, thank you for your work. It is truly anointed, and it fills a space that education, we don't go into that space enough, especially as Black people, and especially with the legacy that you said, that you were talking about, that we carry. I've been in teacher education now for 15 plus years. Today, my question is coming as a parent. I have a 6-year-old, and the work that I do with my child to build up her confidence within our home and surrounding her with the knowledge of our families and our history and our background. And then when she goes to school, I see that light sucked out. So how do we as parents, and how do the teachers in this room work as co-conspirators? What would you say would be some recommendations to work as co-conspirators so that we don't see our children's light sucked out when they go to school?
You know, tell me your name.
I'm Shartria Collier. I'm the Associate Dean at Nevada State College. We're a small college out.
Okay.
Yes.
It's nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
I think, I don't know that I would change some of the things that I said today. You know, these structures of public education are problematic. They have been problematic since they were designed, without a whole lot of people being a part of that design. It still, for me, rests with teachers. The possibility for that light to shine in your daughter's eyes at school rests with her teachers. So I still think that the work is about teacher ed. It's about, less so about curriculum, but about teacher ed and who are in classrooms teaching kids. I think one of the questions we've got to sort of wrestle with, and I think about this a lot as a dean in our teacher ed program, is everybody supposed to be teaching? And what are the prerequisites and requirements for someone to be a teacher? So, that comes from a space where when I'm in our school, we have a school in Ghana, my husband and I, about 150 of the most incredible kids on the planet, the most incredible kids on the planet, in a small rural community where most of their parents have never been to school. These kids, the light in these kids is unbelievable. Everybody believes they can do everything. They speak 3 languages. They do all the things. But part of that has to do with our teachers, many of whom have never stepped foot in a teacher education college. They live in the community. They speak languages that kids speak. They believe in the transformative ways of being literate. So dance, music, art are all central to the curriculum that we have. But I can remember back as a child, a whole long time ago, that was similar to an education that I had. So part of this is resting with us. To what extent do we love Black children? And to what extent are we ready for them? Because to be ready for them means that the space in which they enter resonates with who they are. Not who we want them to be, but with who they are. And if we don't know who they are, then we don't know how to create the spaces for them. So to the teacher's point here and there, we are the ones that have the work to do. What do we know about Black children? When many of us don't live in Black communities, we haven't had a lot of interaction, we don't have a lot of Black friends. What do we know about Black children? So I don't know that I have a good answer for you, other than please, as a parent, continue to reinforce with your daughter and to put her in spaces where Blackness is valued and affirmed. But I'm saying to all of us, If I walk into the classroom, how would I know that you love black kids? How would I know it? If I'd never been in there before, I walk in and I say, ooh, this person loves black kids. How would I know that? And it isn't just about the representations on the wall. It's about what you're doing with them. It's about the ways that their culture shows up in the curriculum. It's about the ways that you understand your children, because again, I can't generalize to all kids. You know your kids, or at least you should know your kids. How do you come to know them? What are the stories that they're allowed to tell you about what it is that they are, who it is that they are, who their people are, what is important to them, in the ways that they understand and know how to say those things? And I'm literally pleading. If I could get down on my knees and get back up again, I might be willing to do it. Because it is that serious. The pandemic, I think, has done something to us. And I think we've got a certain kind of humanity that we have to gather back. But I'm hoping in that gathering it's going to include a real attention to the ways that Black lives matter. Because honestly, Black, Indigenous, Native American, Latinx, Asian lives are the ones, those histories and heritages are the ones that will save us. All of us. You want to know about land, you want to know about the planet, you want to know about how to teach, you want to know about humanity, ask those communities. They understand it deeply. But can we be open enough to learn? So that's my long-winded answer, sis, to a question that I don't have an answer for. But we've got work to do. Yeah.
We have a question from our online community.
Okay.
How do we do the work with the pushback from parents, from
Absolutely.
the structure? Just how do we engage in that work with the pushback that we get from within the building, outside of the building? How do we do that?
Again, this is it sounds sort of Pollyannish even when I say it. But if we look at leaders whom we admire, you know, folks often want to call up Dr. Martin Luther King, so let's use him. We look at, he took risks. He did it anyhow, right? He became knowledgeable about the subject matter that he was engaging in and the people that he knew he was fighting for. He was willing to take those risks because he clearly understood the assignment. And the assignment was bigger than the fact that he was a pastor. The assignment was on purpose. It was on his purpose, right? And I think many of us won't ask the question, and I raise this question in my second book, this question about, you know, what are we willing to live for? And what are we willing to risk and maybe die for? Now, I'm not saying that I'm encouraging any of that for us as educators. But if you look at the history of education in this country and around the world, it's been a place, a site of struggle. It's been a site where people have lived and died because of the opportunity to get smart. So I guess to the online folks, these are choices that you will need to make. What is it that you're willing to be that committed to? That you're willing to possibly lose something to gain something?
Good morning. I'm grateful to be here, learning so much with you guys. And the thing that resonates with me is we know that the teacher sets the tone for the classroom, right, and getting to know students.
Absolutely.
But we also know that building leaders, principals.
Yes.
Our classroom is much larger. Do you do work with leadership
Yep.
so that that is established from the top so that that is cultivated in teachers in the way that we train and grow our future leaders. Our teachers are leaders, right? And so are all of our support professionals. But how do we address the leadership issue, which is training us to be cognizant of who we are with, doing this work with, so that our kids, families, parents feel welcome enough and safe enough to address things like race so that kids can be successful. Because if we don't know who we are, if we don't know who our students are, right, and we don't have an opportunity to teach those things from the leadership perspective, how then can a teacher be successful unless they have the support of the leadership?
And I think you basically said it, right? I don't know that the conversations would be radically different with leaders than they would be with teachers. Because as you said, we all exist in some sort of leadership position as educators. But what I will say is that that's an important, leaders in schools are important. Leaders above those leaders in schools are important because they set that tone. But I think the frame stays the same. Leaders also need to be engaged in this work of remembering. And teachers actually have the opportunity to be able to help in that endeavor, right? To set an example of the kind of shifts that are possible when one begins to remember, when one begins to do different kinds of research or different kinds of visioning for a life for children. But I don't know that the framework shifts for me much between leaders and classroom teachers. But I do think both are critical, absolutely critical. Because as the folks online reminded us, these structures are not happy with change. They're not happy when we're asking them to do something different. But you cannot be beholden solely to the structure. There has to be some relationship or beholdenness with the people in the school, your kids. If you're a principal or a leader, your teachers and the larger community around you. So yeah, I don't know that I would shift too much in terms of what needs to happen, but it does need to happen. One of the things that we're thinking about at Seattle University, where I am right now, we've had a leadership program, but it is focused on leadership, sort of models of leadership, versus on leadership as an act of building capacity for freedom. And that's where we're moving now, is in a certificate program that really begins to open up the possibilities for leaders to really think about themselves on purpose, for a purpose, not necessarily to sort of regurgitate the same organizational models that I went through leadership education with. It's not that they're bad models, but they're not necessarily models that are complex enough to deal with the kinds of things that school leaders are having to deal with today. And so figuring out what that kind of a leadership program looks like. I'm excited about our work. We haven't gotten very far yet, but I'll keep you posted. But you're right, kind of work on leaders too.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I don't want y'all to be mad at me, but it's time to end this session.
Oh my, okay. Dang.
Our next speakers are just as fab. Well, I shouldn't say that. Our next speakers are going to be really good. We appreciate it. If you still have, don't forget, you've got your red, yellow, green for your session. If you have questions that you want to ask for the Q&A, write them down. She's just going down the hall. She'll be back in here. You have about a 5-minute window. If you need to throw things away, stretch your legs, run to the bathroom.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for your work.